What's up guys, it's Eric here, and welcome to my top 5 comps of patch 12.5b. The B patch came out earlier this week and shook up the meta a decent bit. Prior to this, we were seeing infinite reroll comps, Talon reroll, Cinder reroll, Ash reroll. Felt like they were absolutely dominating the meta, and it also felt like there are some augments that were just kind of auto-win if you get them early, like Payday, One for All, or All for One. I can never remember which one it is. The Yordles one, so small. All of those things have been made a little bit more reasonable, and those comps have been nerfed a bit to the point where I actually feel like this is a really well-balanced patch. So I'm going to go into my top 5 comps of this patch, but I will say that I feel like this patch is super balanced. And you can see that by just going to meta TFT. You're looking at the highest win rate comp has an average placement of 4.14. That's like actually quite high compared to in the past. You know, when like Renata and Sipper were super OP, Renata had a win rate of like 3.8 something, 3.9 something. Like the best comp being at a 4.14 and all of these other comps being quite close to it makes me think that this is actually a very well balanced patch. Now, that being said, win rate is not everything, so I am just going to go into the patch and run down what I think are my top 5 comps, and we're going to start with this one. So this is Twitch Reroll. You guys have seen this before. I've played it a ton. I absolutely enjoy playing it. I love a brain dead reroll comp where you just get these units early on, roll a bunch of Twitches, or maybe some augment that's really good, or some items that are really good, and say, I'm all in on Twitch Reroll. So yeah, this is the board. You are trying to get to 5 Innovators, plus a little bit of everything else, 2 Clockworks, by teching in the Camille, which then you can also tech in the Warwick to get Challengers, you tech in the Twitch to give you Assassin, and those 3 Chemtechs are going to give you Chemtech. So yeah, this is the board. This is a pretty inflexible comp, right? If you're playing Twitch Reroll, you are going to be playing all of these units pretty much every time. You're usually going to just be rolling for these 6 units, ideally rolling down as much as possible at level 5 and, if possible, level 4, because you're really trying to 3-star Israel, Camille, Singed, and Twitch, and then you can go up to level 5. You're going to have to, and then level 6 and roll for the other ones, or ideally you can just push levels. If you get a 3-star Twitch and maybe some of these 3-starred, getting a 3-star Warwick is not that important, in my opinion. But yeah, so you'll usually just be playing these units early, and then you'll have to add these 2 in later. So you'll be playing this board at level 6, which is a pretty decent 3 Innovator board. Then you'll go to level 7, add in your Zillion, who I've immediately lost here now that I've moved him away. He's at 2, he's Zed. And then stick with this board for a little bit at level 7, and then you'll go level 8, put in your Seraphine, and have 5 Innovator. And, there's obviously different stuff you can do. If you get like +1 Innovator, you can look to perhaps cut a Warwick, because he's giving you Chemtech and Challenger. But at the end of the day, if you could, say, get +1 Innovator, cut Warwick, and play like a Jace, and have +1 Innovator so that you go up to 7 Innovator, that's definitely worthwhile. There's some different stuff you can do at level 8 and 9, but this is almost always going to be your level 8 comp, unless you have like +1 Innovator, and then you can cut this for something else. So yeah, Twitch Reroll, I think it's a super solid comp. If you like playing Reroll, you can play this comp. This patch, however, I don't think is super dominated by Reroll like last patch, so I don't think you can just play a Reroll comp every single game and farm top 4s, but I think this is a pretty solid Reroll way to play the game if you want to play that way. And speaking of Reroll, this is the other Reroll comp that I think is strongest right now, and this is Twinshot Reroll. I gave it as an honorable mention on my last patch preview, my tier list or best comps, but honestly, I may have even been underrating it there. It was quite strong last patch, and it's still pretty strong this patch. Notable things have been nerfed, like Corky's damage and Lucian's damage have been nerfed, but it's still pretty strong with everything else that has been nerfed. So if you get, say, an early +1 Twinshot, or even, +2 Twinshot augment, you can definitely look at playing this comp and say, I'm just going to hard force it, look to carry Gangplank, and look to carry Lucian. Roll down, ideally for GP and Lucian. This is a variation where you're also rolling down for Enchanters and playing 3 Yordles. So you can put in Lulu, Gnar, and Corky, have 3 Yordles in, farm some extra Gnar, Corkys, and Lulus, eventually 3-star all of those along with Lucian, and Gangplank, and even potentially 3-starring Senna and Morgana, as well as Enchanters, and then Leona as well, to just beef up your front line. This works really well if you have the Triforce Augment that's going to buff up all your 3 costs, because this is a variation of the comp that's running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 3 costs at level 8, so quite solid. But there's a lot of different ways you can play this comp, because really the core that you're building around here is just going to be these 3 twin shots. So there's a ton of different stuff you can do. If you want to, you can say get in a Sejuani to get you that extra Hex Tech, put in a Vi as well, give you Bruiser and Enforcer, also the Rival buff. You can late game get in a Jinx, but that means you're probably not playing this Vi variant because, you know, you don't want a Rival. So you can end up, if you're playing the variation that plays a Jinx, you're probably not going to play Vi, probably play more of like a Bodyguard's front line. So you can just throw in randomly the Leona plus the Baron, if I can find him, and then just build around this core with the 4 twin shot plus these 2. So just throw in other things really, because getting you know, Lucian has kind of a fake extra trait in like Hex Tech. You know, you're not ever gonna go like vertical Hex Tech. You're not ever gonna go vertical Mercenary with GP, and you're not ever, you know, going vertical Yordles doesn't really provide you anything. So you don't really have to build around these. Probably if you're playing this variant, you're actually playing Blitzcrank. Yeah, that's my bad. They get in Scrap as well, and you could even play, this is only 6 units, so you could even play a 4 Scrap variant, get an Echo plus 1 more Scrap unit, which would probably be Irelia. And then you can play like a 4 Scrap variant of this with Jinx. Echo is actually really solid with this because Echo's ability buffs up all the units in the biggest cluster, basically. That's always going to be GP, most likely, unless he's dead. So I really like playing Echo with more melee carries. And, you know, Jinx is also going to ult into the middle of the enemy team. I think this is a pretty cool variation of the comp where you're playing 4 Scrap and Echo's buffing up all of your units. So, yeah, this is one way to play the comp. Lots of other things to flex around. I mean, really, you were just playing around your 3 twin shot units, and then late game, you're trying to get in the Jinx for 4 twin shot, and then build the comp around that, basically. If you're playing Jinx, you're probably not playing Vi, but outside of that, you can play any frontline, really. You can play that Enchanter's frontline, like we were looking at earlier, using stuff like Morgana and Senna. You could even play, like, Morgana plus Senna. This is 6 units. Heck in, where are my guys? Gnar, for a little bit more frontline, and then throw in Seraphine for a 3 Socialite variant, and then just drop GP on the Socialite Hex or Lucian, depending on who you 3-star and who's really buffed up. So a lot of stuff you can do with this comp. Really cool. All right, the next comp I want to get into is not actually a reroll comp. So we have 2 reroll comps so far, but our next 3 comps are not reroll comps. So this patch, I don't think is going to be dominated by reroll, which I think is cool. I think reroll should have a place, but it shouldn't be super OP. But to finally get into it, it is Renata Bruisers, and you really love to have a Silco in this comp. So, but Renata's the real carry. So yeah, it is Renata Bruisers. I think this is also a very fun comp. When this was like one of the most broken comps in the game, I was absolutely spamming the heck out of it. And I mean, it's just so fun to have an incredibly beefy frontline and then have Renata just throw her poison gas at the enemy team and make it so 1, they're not doing a ton of damage, and 2, that they're dying. Especially if you can get a Morello's on her, incredibly strong item. Blue buff on her is quite good. If you have to put like a Shojin on her, you can. It's not the end of the world, but blue buff really good on her. Morello's blue buff, and then Hextech Gunblade, I think, is best in slot Renata. If you can get those 3 items on Renata and just let her do work, you should win lots of games. So this is the 6 Bruiser variant, which is pretty good, right? You can stabilize at level 8 with this variant. However, once you start either pushing level 9 or you have, say, +1 Bruiser and you want to add more units, you should definitely look at adding a Viktor to this comp. So that's also going to give you the Chemtech buff once you have Viktor in, and put him in Silco's little buff. So if you go level 9, you can just play this variant. If you have, say, +1 Bruiser, you can always cut Alawi, because, you know, you'd always cut Alawi to play Viktor. You can also, if you are just level 8 and you say you hit a Viktor and you don't feel like you need to play a really tanky frontline, you have a lot of tank items, you can cut this guy, or Rek'Sai, and then put another Arcanist. So it could be Malzahar. It is usually Ahri as the other Arcanist you play. So you could just do something like this, where Silco is buffing up these guys, and then, you know, Ahri can do work. You can put her here. If you want to protect against, say, like Blitzcrank hooks, you could do this, or you could just move her up and do something like this. So yeah, this is a really cool comp. The getting Viktor and Ahri in is like most of the flexibility there. Like, it's a pretty rigid comp because you need to play the Bruiser frontline, and, you know, if you're playing Vi, and you want to play Bruiser frontline, you're always going to be playing Sejuani, and then at that point, getting in Tahm Kench is kind of a no-brainer. If you want to play any kind of like Bruiser frontline, might as well just play 4. So get in Tahm Kench, and then Zac makes sense, giving you the Chemtech buff with these 3. So this is actually a very strong version of the comp at level 8, and you know, if you can get in +1 Bruiser, you could say, got the Ahri, and put in, not the Alawi, but the Rek'Sai. I mean, either one, depending on who you hit. But, you know, this is the variant of the comp that's actually quite strong. If you have, say, +1 Bruiser, then you'll have 6 Bruiser in, or if you have +1 Arcanist, you can also do this. So yeah, really cool comp. I had a ton of fun with this, and I think it's quite strong in this patch. This is the only AP comp that I have on the tier list. I think AP is in kind of a weird state right now, where, you know, you can play Renata, and you can play AP in the Lucian, but outside of that, I don't think there's that much strong AP carries that you can play. I don't think Malzahar is that good in niche scenarios, right? Like Synaptic Web Mutant, I think makes Malzahar really strong as a carry, and you know, Metamorphosis can be really strong depending on the situation. Darkstar can be strong if you get a lot of like target dummies, things like that. But in general, I don't think Malzahar is that strong. I don't think Ahri is a very strong AP carry. You can try to make her work, but I haven't had too much success with it. She just seems very middling, and you'd always want to play Renata, basically. Orianna isn't really an AP carry. Seraphine isn't really an AP carry right now. You know, I don't think the like Chalice Slam Orianna Seraphine comp that existed a little bit more in set 6, I don't think that's very strong right now, but I will get more into Chalice Slam as a possibility. But yeah, I really think this is one of the only AP comps that you can play, which is when I get into my item start of the game carousel items. Spoiler alert, I still like starting sword because it allows you to go into AD easily, but also something interestingly, so like the best AP carries right now, Renata, Lucian, Malzahar, all of those can hold a gunblade pretty well, so I'm quite happy still starting the sword and slamming it on any of those units, so just something to keep in mind. All right, let's get into comp number 2. This is Socialite Irelia. This has just been on the list pretty much every time I've made one of these videos. It is still a very strong comp. I've talked about it before. I've played some games on it, so you can check those out. And I mean, at this point, is there much left for me to say? I guess if you haven't heard my spiel on it, you put 3 Socialite units in, you put Irelia in the Socialite Hex, and just let her go. Go Irelia, kill everything. Ideally, the Socialite Hex is in one of the front 2 rows. If you have it, if the Socialite Hex is like here in the back row, you're probably not playing Irelia, because if you put Irelia back here just to walk all the way up to the front, you're losing a lot of time. So it's much easier if it's something up here, here, something like that. It's not the end of the world, but I would not look to play this comp if the Socialite Hex was in the back row. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You can't like force this comp every single game, but I think in the games where it is in the front rows, you get some kind of augment that buffs up the units in the front rows, or you just get, you know, +1 Socialite or +1 Scrap. You can definitely play this. As I say when I talk about +1 Scrap, this is the 4 Scrap variant, but you can also play a Strikers variant with multiple Strikers if you're already in the 2 Strikers, because you always want to have Gnar plus Irelia in, but then, you know, you can put stuff in like Jarvan plus Sivir if you want to get a little bit of Hextech synergy in there. You can put in Rek'Sai if you want some more tankiness. There's a few different ways that you can take this comp, but you're always going to be playing this core of 3 Socialite units plus Irelia, and that gives you the 2 Striker. I also think, as I was talking about before, Echo is a really nice unit to play in this comp, not only because it gives you the strap buff with Irelia, but also, like I was talking about, Echo's spell is... It's an insane spell when you think about the attack speed that you're giving to all of the units in that circle, and also the attack speed reduction you're giving to the enemy units. It synergizes so well with Irelia, a unit that wants to be jumping into the enemy team and then killing everything. It's 1, going to stop her from dying, and 2, going to make it so that she can kill stuff faster. So I think Echo, absolutely core. And then at this point, you know, you have all of these guys in, you can think about slotting in another Innovator. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. So yeah, this is Socialite Irelia. I think the second best comp. It's a very easy comp to cap out at level 8 with an Irelia too. And these are very good items on Irelia: Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, Quicksilver. Quicksilver can be replaced with Bloodthirster. You can also go like a Giant Slayer on Irelia if you feel like you need extra damage versus tanks, like you feel like she can't get through them. There's a few different ways you can go with Irelia, but she does really like to have some kind of defensive item on her because she's a melee carry. So whether that's Bloodthirster, whether that's Quicksilver, whether that's, say, like Edge of Night, probably want some kind of defensive item on her, and then you want other items so that she can actually get through the tanks and the carries on the enemy team. So those are the top 4 comps. The number 1 comp is 5 Innovators. I'm calling it 5 Innovators Flex Carry. So the variant I'm showing right now is Kha'Zix Carry. So the 3 units that I'm playing in addition to 5 Innovators are Vi plus Orianna plus Kha'Zix. But there are a lot of different variations of this comp that you can play. So I'm not saying that Kha'Zix Innovators is the strongest comp in the game. I think other variations like the Jhin variant, which I also think is super strong. So then in that case, you're going to be playing Jhin. Ideally, you play Caitlyn as your extra sniper because when you have the Jason, you also get the Enforcer buff. So you can play something like this and have Jhin sniper carry. So that's another thing you can carry. You could also potentially just play straight up Orianna carry. So just put in Orianna as an AP carry, maybe put Chalices, and then you can put in any other units really, because this is only 6 units you already have in your 5 Innovators, your 2 Clockworks. So you can potentially get in Jhin plus Camille. So this is a 4 Clockwork variant where you can play Orianna carry, you can play Jhin carry, and then you have 4 Clockwork in plus all this good stuff. You can also, instead of this, just load up on Enchanters. So you could potentially play like a Morgana frontline. You get extra Enchanters in there, and then you can also get in a Seraphine to give you 2 Socialite and 3 Enchanter. And speaking of Socialite, you could also potentially go a variation where you're playing this Socialite, you're playing this Socialite, and then you play Gnar, and then you can play an Irelia variation where you're playing 3 Socialite Irelia, but you're also playing 5 Innovators. This is only playing 4 scrap, so if you have, say, a +1 scrap, this can be really useful. Or you could even, say, cut the Gnar, put in something like a Blitzcrank, and play 4 scrap, only play 2 Socialite if, say, you have a +1 Socialite, or if you feel like you don't really need the healing. So I really just feel like this core, this 5 Innovator core, is like the strongest in the game. So if you just play around this, I didn't even talk about, even though I'm talking about Senna, you don't even have to play other carries. You can just play Senna as your AD carry. So you can just play this variation like I was talking about with Enchanters, with Morgana plus my good friend Orianna. You can just play this variation, the Enchanter variation, and then just buff up Senna, or give Senna all of your items and make her an AD carry. She is a very strong carry. So there's another variation you can play. So this is an incredibly flexible comp. If you get some early Innovators, ideally a 2-star Ezreal and then a 2-star Singed early, throw in a Zillion, you have a very strong start to the game, and you can kind of build it around this. Usually it ends up being AD, right? Your AD carry ends up being Senna, it ends up being Kha'Zix, it ends up being Jhin, or it can even end up being a backline Jace if you want to play Jace carry, and then just play around these 5 units and then build frontline if you want, whether that's Bruisers or Bodyguards. It makes most sense really to play Bodyguards at this phase because you have the scrap synergy, so you can very easily get in a Blitzcrank, and then even if you want to play something like an Irelia, and then you have a really strong frontline, and then you would just tech in Braum last. And here you have a strong Bodyguard frontline and 4 scrap, and you just leave Jace at the back to do work. This is something that you could do. So usually you have an AD carry in this comp. That doesn't mean you have to. Seraphine holds AP items pretty well. Orianna holds AP items pretty well. I don't feel like they're premier AP carries. I feel like if you're going into this tree, you probably don't want to be taking AP items. I would always, if I have like a Last Whisper early, be more happier about going into this tree than if I had, say, a Spear of Shojin or something like that. Even though Orianna and Seraphine use those items pretty well. It's just I feel like they're not that good of carries. So yeah, that is the comp. I think it's incredibly strong. And that's my top 5 comps of the patch. Now, just for some general thoughts on the patch, tempo, those kind of things. As far as tempo, like, is this a fast patch where you want to roll down all your gold at level 6 or level 7 to stabilize? Or do you want to greed up to level 8 and spend your gold then? I think it's more towards the greedier side, right? I mean, if you look at these comps, my top 3 comps are all based around 2-starring a 4 cost, usually, you know, if you're playing like the Jhin, the Kha'Zix, the Orianna variations of this, and getting a 5 cost in the case of Renata 2 5 costs here, and in the case of Innovators, ideally you get in that Jace. So I think more people are going to want to go level 8 and roll down their gold. I don't think it's as bad as, say, when we were in the Kaisa meta last set, where everyone was just trying to find like 2-star Kaisa and play around that. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think people are going to play quite that greedy, but it is a bit greedier than, you know, say like the Katarina meta of set 6. I'm always referring to set 6 because that's like one of the sets I played the most, where, you know, people were just, you have to roll down a lot of gold to stabilize or you're going to take infinite damage to Katarina. So that's what I think on tempo. And as far as starting items, I did say earlier that I really like the sword start, but I will give you guys, if you're staying this long into the video, a teeny little nugget of knowledge, a teeny little tip. So this is meta TFT, the strongest items on this patch. You can see why sword is really good, right? Infinity Edge is one of the best items, so start an Infinity Edge component. That makes sense, right? So many units want Infinity Edge, right? Twitch loves Infinity Edge, GP loves Infinity Edge, no Infinity Edge here, but Irelia loves Infinity Edge, and then Jin, Jace, whatever, loves Infinity Edge. So 4 of the top 5 comps use Infinity Edge, so get an Infinity Edge. It's good, right? Something that I think is kind of blown under the radar, I don't see a ton of people talking about it, Zeke's Herald is kind of an insane item if you look at win percentage and average placement on it. Compared to a lot of other stuff, it's incredibly strong, and I don't see people slamming this item that often. I think some of the really top players have caught onto it, but until I looked at these stats and also looked at like really good players playing, I did not realize how strong Zeke's Herald was. To that end, to that point, Chalice of Power is also really strong, Banshee's Claw is pretty strong, and Lock of the Iron Solari is also strong. So all of these sort of aura items are actually really good, like much better than I was giving them credit for. You know, maybe everyone out there is going to say, yeah, we knew these items were OP, I slam them every single game, but I was not slamming Zeke's Herald super early. But if you get a sword and a Giant's Belt early, I would absolutely slam a Zeke's Herald early. It is going to help you win streak so easily. So that's something to keep in mind with the sword start. It's so good because not only can you slam the Infinity Edge early, you can also slam Zeke's Herald. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the patch. This is going to be a long patch. It's supposed to be 3 weeks long, so settle in. I think, as I was talking about before, it's a very well-balanced patch. So I'm happy to be playing on this patch for the next almost month. I think it's very well done by Mortdog and the balancing team. So hats off to them, and good luck climbing, everybody, with these comps and everything else. You know, these are my top 5. I mean, not these 5, but this is actually pretty close. But these are my top 5 comps, but I think there's a ton of other stuff you can play. Don't feel like you only have to play these 5 comps, because I feel like the patch is incredibly balanced. You know, you scroll through meta TFT and you see stuff like Chemtech Reroll, Talon's still good, Mutant's still okay, you know, the Striker variant of Irelia, like Malzahar roll. There's a lot of other stuff you can play that's not much worse, right? 4.45 versus like some of the top comps 4.3. Basically the same. So yeah, good luck on the climb, and I hope everybody enjoyed the video. If you did, I greatly appreciate it. If you subscribe to the channel, like the video, also check out all my links down below. I got a ton of cool stuff for you, depending on your perspective, ways to stay connected with me, stay notified when I make new content, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, thanks for everyone who watched the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.